Welcome everybody to the Patron pre-show.
Oh, the pre-show! Man, we're the elite meet to greet.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So it's the pre-show now.
Yes.
But it's a festive Hallowmastide pre-show. It's not just one of your ordinary pre-shows.
Yeah, it's a solemn pre-show.
That's right. Filled with holiday cheer and that kind of thing.
Yes.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it.
All right. What do we got for pre-show questions from elite pre-show questionnaires?
Okay, first question is from Nate.
All right, Nate.
Charles, do you believe there are monsters in the ocean that scientists have not discovered? And what does European folklore tell us about such creatures?
Oh, I can see Halloween is nearing. Well, what can I say? Do I believe it? Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, there's all sorts of weird things in the deep. And every now and then we bumble into something new. What did folklore tell us about them? Well, there was the Kraken, the gigantic octopus-like thing, or squid-like thing that would pull ships apart and otherwise make life unpleasant for those aboard. We know about, in recent years, we've discovered giant squids in the deep blue sea that are hideously huge. Could there be squids that are even bigger? Who knows? How about sea serpents? Who knows? Maybe. I don't know. Could be true. There's certainly been stories of them. And of course, there are the ever popular stories of lake monsters, like Nessie in Loch Ness and Champy in Lake Champlain. Do such creatures exist or not? I kind of think they do, because it's hard for me to believe that you would have so many sightings of the same sorts of stuff all the time for so long, and there'd be nothing to it. But do I know what they are? Do I have a supposition as to what they are precisely? I do not. I have heard theories ranging from sea slugs to interdimensional fauna. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I know there are creatures that scientists have not discovered yet, because they're discovering new creatures all the time still.
And presumably they were undiscovered until they were discovered.
Yeah, presumably.
Yeah.
What do you think about Nessie? I've actually, that's the one thing I've looked up a lot, and it seems like the famous picture of Nessie is a hoax. I think they said they kind of disproved it, but at the same time, I kind of believe it's like an old dinosaur that was trapped there or something.
Perhaps. I don't know. Maybe. Could be. I mean, I don't have a deep feeling about it. I've never even been to Loch Ness. I've been to Scotland, but I've never gone to Loch Ness, which I should have done. I should have made a pilgrimage to where the monster is. But again, there have been stories of the thing forever and ever. And my problem, whether or not the photo was faked, it could not have been an effective fake had there not been a pre-existing story.
Right.
And, how do these things get manufactured? I always like to say that you never hear folk tales of elephants and trees. And there's a good reason for that.
Yeah, because you'd never see, I mean, it's impossible. I mean, not impossible, but
it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
So, whether or not the picture was true or false, I don't know. I suspect, though, that there's something in Loch Ness, or people wouldn't continually see it. And it's interesting to me that the same folk who say, oh, well, it's just mass hallucination or suggestion or whatever, accept as gospel so many other things that are patently ridiculous. But never mind.
Okay.
What else we got?
Okay, next question is from Brian.
Hello, Brian.
Charles, I can't stand how sports ball players are worshipped as idols in the place of the veneration of saints in days gone by. It seems to be all that many people talk about, and it pains me to think about all the time and money wasted on sports.
Especially the money.
This is the true opiate of the masses, the circuses of our times. Would you ever think about writing a book on the subject? I may have to myself.
No, I never would, but I would certainly encourage you to. I don't know enough about the topic, really. It doesn't really, and it doesn't really matter all that much to me one way or the other. You know the old saying, it's easy to be tolerant when you don't care. But having said that, my esteemed interlocutor, Vincenzo Franchini, actually accused me of being anti-sports. Well, you did.
I did.
You,
That's
you
right.
said
No,
it
I
in
proudly
your
stand
show.
by that. Yeah, you are anti-sports. That's right.
I am not anti-sports. I'm all for sports. Now, the question is whether I'm for professional sports, whether I'm for the sports industry. That's a horse of a different color. I mean, obviously, I've been against the Dodgers since they abandoned Brooklyn. You know, that's obvious.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I know what he's talking about. A ton of money, et cetera, goes into professional sports. And the question is, what's the benefit? I mean, the Olympics and things like that, they do encourage non-professionals to compete. So you can make the case for that kind of thing. I think his real problem is not sports per se, but the idea of professional sports as an industry. And that's a conversation worth having. I mean, you can ask yourself, what is it exactly they produce? You know, local pride, I guess. Every time the Dodgers win in LA, we have a riot downtown to, show that we're number one and that kind of thing. I remember when the soccer World Cup was held in Pasadena and Brazil was playing somebody, I forget who, and Brazil won. There were all these jubilant Brazilians running around the streets of Pasadena, and none of the natives knew what soccer was. And they didn't understand why they had all these jubilant Brazilians running around the streets of Pasadena, Old Town, waving Brazilian flags and jumping up and down and drinking mojitos so they couldn't stand straight. Yeah, I don't know.
When was the last time you played a board game?
A board game?
Yeah.
I've never bored when I play games.
When was the last time you played any cards?
I don't know, about a week ago.
What'd you play?
Poker.
Nice. The problem with this argument is let's apply it to video games, and you know what? Let's go ahead and apply it to movies. Let's do that. I think we shouldn't be watching. I think we shouldn't have superhero movies because we're turning heroes. We shouldn't be idolizing these heroes instead of saints. That's actually Solange Hertz's argument, and I actually agree with that. So go all the way, Brian, if you're going to go this route. Go all the way.
Well, wait a minute.
Oh,
Let's talk about
but wait a minute. I like superhero
let's talk about
movies.
Superman, last survivor of Krypton.
See,
Now, are you honestly going to tell me that after escaping his exploding home planet, the boy doesn't deserve some credit? Oh, wait a minute. You're one of those who doesn't believe Superman exists, aren't you? I think you don't even believe in Batman or the Flash.
I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what your point is.
My what?
Your point.
I'm cut to the quick. You think I'd have a point in a conversation like that? You're insane.
Okay. I mean, I just don't like when people condemn things out of taste. I don't like sports, so I condemn sports.
Well, there's a Latin phrase, de gustibus non est disputandum, which means in matters of taste, there can be no argument.
Exactly.
So what else you got?
Next question's from Joseph. I would like to ask about your perspective on the English Civil War and the regicide of Charles I. Specifically, how did a country once as Catholic as England get to such a low point? And what lasting impact did these traumatic events have on the English national psyche?
Well, that's a good question. And the answer is severalfold. Firstly, despite the resistance to, Charles I and the English Civil War were the inevitable result, or maybe not inevitable, but they were certainly the result of Henry VIII's breaking with Rome, and above all, stealing the monastery lands and distributing them amongst his cronies. Because the grandchildren of those cronies were the Puritan oligarchy that ended up taking control of the country and putting Charles I to death. And of course, Henry VIII set a terrible precedent, because of the church. If the altar was not sacred, then neither was the crown, ultimately. In other words, the Puritans were simply following out the same line of reasoning to a very foul end. As to what effect it had on England, well, it was horrendous. I mean, the shadow of that murder has lied over that country until this very day in many different ways. It certainly hampered the monarchy for the rest of time, down to ourselves. The same thing happened with France and Louis XVI, and with Russia and Nicholas II. You know, when you murder your divinely anointed king, oh, God bless you inside of me, keeping you up there. No, it's wonderful being on the other side for once. It really is. But anyway, I digress. So, no, the sad truth of the matter is that murdering their divinely anointed king leaves a terrible mark on a nation. Now, if you ask, how did it get that way? How did France get its way? How did Russia, Holy Mother Russia, become the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics at a popular level now? Well, it's the same way we became the United States of abortion and sodomy. I'm so old, I remember when both these things were despised and illegal. And I saw them go, in my own lifetime, from being things that everybody universally abhorred and claimed to be disgusted at, to protected, sacramentalized, holy, sacred proofs of our freedom. How did that happen? It happens the way any thing like that happens. The masters on top decide that from now on we're all going to wear underwear on our heads. And most of us go, well, okay, I don't like that very much. I can only see out of one eye, but I mean, if the boss man say it, then I got to bark like a dog, because the boss man going to beat me with a whip if I don't do as I'm told. Some people say, I don't think I'm going to do that. And a good chunk of them get martyred. And a chunk of them get exiled. And a chunk of them get marginalized, as we say in universities, those centers of great intelligence. So that's how it happens. You know, if you wonder how foreigners could go from being devout Catholic or Orthodox monarchists to being the scum of the earth, look at us. We managed it in my own lifetime. It's great stuff. Any country can do it if it's got the right kind of leadership.
I've developed a new hypothesis with the pro-abortion thing, because it's so illogical and irrational, even on a secular basis, in my opinion. I feel like being pro-abortion is only possible when you are not in a state of grace, when you've got mortal sin and that darkness that clouds your intellect. Only then can you acquiesce to stopping a heartbeat.
And saying it's a good thing to do.
And saying it's a good thing. I mean, that's, you know, I can't see, here's the thing, I can't see a person in a state of grace actually saying that. You see what I'm saying?
I do. And I see no reason to dispute your point. I mean, remember too that these people, well, the more you buy into a sin, the more you have to defend it, and the more you've got to try to prove to everyone else, because you're really proving to yourself that it's a good thing. I mean, I'll give you an example. End of life issues.
Oh.
You know, when you find yourself, through the work of the doctor, complicit in the death of your parent or grandparent, you have to somehow defend that decision. And they give you all sorts of reasons to do so, and after all, they're doctors, so they know better and stuff. It's hard. It's very hard. And the alternative is to face yourself and say, I did something really wrong. And if you do say that, even if you're not a Catholic, then you're well on your way to some sort of self-knowledge, if nothing else. But how hard is it for any of us to do that?
Yeah.
So, you know. Anyway, what else we got?
What do you think about Haile Selassie? What kind of man was he? What did he do in Ethiopia? Why did the Rastafarians think he was Jesus?
Mm. Well,
Whoa.
you're not the only one.
Whoa. Okay.
You're not the only one.
Okay.
You think you got some sort of lock on fatigue, you know. Oh, I've got a fatigue monopoly. No, you don't. You have to share.
Okay.
It's just the way it is. But anyway, Haile Selassie brought Ethiopia into the 20th century, as they say. By and large, I think he was a good fellow. He was certainly the last Christian emperor.
He was Eastern Orthodox?
Well, no, he was Ethiopian Orthodox.
Ethiopian Orthodox. Okay, got it. Yeah.
They split off from the church at the time of the Council of Chalcedon, and yet they claim they're not Monophysite, which was the heresy that was condemned. So who knows?
What is that?
They claim to not to hold Monophysitism, which is the heresy that was condemned by the Council.
No, I meant what is that heresy?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's the idea that there's only one nature in Jesus Christ.
The divine?
Yeah. So basically it taught that our Lord's human nature was completely absorbed by his divine.
Interesting.
So.
Okay.
Oh, now as far as the Rastafarians, well, I mean, there was a couple of reasons. One, the imperial family of Ethiopia claimed to be descended from Solomon and Sheba, i.e. to be successors of King David.
Were they?
Now,
why
I don't
did
know.
they do
I wasn't
that?
there.
Oh.
Well, I wasn't there, but it's the claim. That's why the dynasty is called Solomonid, because descendants of Solomon.
That is Solomon's. The line of kings is the line of David, right? So that's in relationship to Jesus. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're related to Jesus, if that is in fact the case. And the coming of this black monarch to an area of the world where blacks were, shall we say, in somewhat substandard positions, that was very exciting for the first Rastas. So the idea that Rastafari might himself be God really excited them. Now, he was always against this and always declared it's not true and had very little use for the Rastas. But what are you going to do? He had no control over them. They weren't Ethiopians.
How did Rastafarianism get transferred from Ethiopia to Jamaica?
It didn't get transferred from Ethiopia. It never was in Ethiopia. I mean, if it had been, he would have suppressed it. Well, you see, there was a big Pan-African movement in the 20s amongst blacks in the United States and the West Indies, especially Jamaica. Now, they had this whole back to Africa thing, Marcus Garvey, the Black Star Line that ran people back and forth in Africa and the Americas. So it was at that time that Rastafari, when he was crown prince, that's what Haile Selassie was called, came over to visit Jamaica and New York and various other places. Well, the blacks went crazy. I mean, here was a black monarch, a king, and they loved him. So that's all there was to it.
So why did they? So he was a victim of regicide as well, wasn't he?
He was murdered by the Derg, the group of dingbats that took over in 1974 or 5 in Ethiopia. The poor man was murdered, and only about 10 or 15 years ago finally got a state funeral and was interred in the imperial mausoleum. But of course, this was always the case. Once the Derg were out of power, the idea of giving up control and surrendering it to the rightful heirs was a little too much for the people who threw them out. It's a little too hard for them,
Yeah, that's a sad story.
Yep, it is. It's a very sad story.
Okay.
What else we got?
Next question is from Katie.
Hello, Katie.
Mr. Coulombe, would you please help me understand the discrepancy between Catholic Bibles and the Protestant versions when it comes to the number of Psalms? Is this an issue of using the Septuagint versus Masoretic version of the Old Testament? Where in the Psalms does the numbering diverge?
That's a very good question. And yes, it does come from the Septuagint versus the Masoretic texts. The Masoretic texts were altered about 90 AD, the Synod of Yamia, to remove most of the references to a coming Messiah that obviously applied to Christ. I know there is a discrepancy in the Psalms, but frankly, I can't tell you precisely what it is or which Psalms are what. So sorry about that.
No, I thought you're getting a master's in theology.
Yeah, well, try the same question in a year, and we'll find out.
Yeah, what are you learning over there? What are they teaching you?
Not scripture yet. Scripture comes later.
No, seriously. Actually, now seriously though, what comes first?
Plato, Aristotle, in many different ways, and Western literature, Dante and Boethius. Music, again, Boethius.
What did Boethius write?
The Constellation of Philosophy. He also wrote about music, so he studied that.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, that'll do it for the pre-show.
Okay, now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to break open that pumpkin pie. Cut out a slice. Maybe pour yourself a pumpkin spice latte, brought all the way to you from Starbucks or the Dunkin'. And, kick back.
Yeah, just be laid back for a little bit and just enjoy yourself. The full episode is on its way.
Yeah, it's autumn. I mean, the hoi polloi are filling in the cheap seats even as we speak. And let's hope it's a good show. Happy Halloween, ladies and gentlemen.